Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Pod.
Buongiorno! Welcome to the filibuster. Hello, I am a Dallas King, and with me, as always, is the Paolo to my Aldo, the Luigi to It's a Mia Mario. It's a Lee Hutchison. How are you?
I mean this in the best possible sense. That accent wouldn't look out of place in the movie House of Gucci 2021, directed by Ridley Scott.
Well, I mean, if that was not a big enough hint, the film that we are unsurprisingly going to be reviewing today is indeed Ridley Scott's 2021, the second film of 2021. He's been a busy man. I say a busy man. He filmed them all years ago. You know, it's just you wait years for a Ridley Scott film, and then two of them come along at once. But we'll be reviewing that in a little bit. First of all, a quick catch up on maybe what we've been watching at home, because this weekend Storm Arwen from Lord of the Rings made its way up to Aberdeen, which meant I was unable to visit the cinema this weekend. I was stuck in a house. So yeah, what have we been watching at home this weekend?
Yeah, I watched Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1. So, as we mentioned last week, we had a wonderful giveaway. Our prize is now out in the post. But I made sure to rewatch. You know, before we give away anything, I've got to make sure it's quality controlled. So, I watched Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1 on Blu-ray, and it came out on Monday, the 29th of November. And yeah, it's probably my favourite Star Trek series to date from the new ones that have been coming out. It's one of those shows. I spoke about it with a friend of the podcast, Carlos Miranda. We were like, who watches this show? Because it is so inside Star Trek that you can't quite imagine normal people watching them. It's from Mike McMahon, the creator of Rick and Morty, for one of the writers on Rick and Morty. And it is just a show that is filled with so much love for Star Trek and the franchise. The animation's fantastic. It's got this wonderful, diverse cast. And I just find it one of those shows you watch like the first time, you think, that's really good. Because Star Trek's reputation for animated series at that point was a show that they'd released sort of between the movies and the original series all the way back in the early 70s. And it's not considered the best at times. It's been considered not part of canon. It didn't even get in the encyclopedia. But this show seems to be one that kind of has united the fandom in a way that you see it with a lot of the new shows just now. People are moaning or complaining, or everyone thinks it's the best, or everyone thinks it's the worst. Whereas everyone kind of watches this and goes, that's really, really good. And, you know, for those not familiar with this one, it's sort of set just after sort of the Next Generation era, and it's about a ship that follows up when a spaceship goes and makes first contact with a species. They come in afterwards and sort of do all the sort of the legwork. And you know, some of the most popular episodes of Star Trek have been about those characters that aren't our captains or commanders or security officers. They're the people that work on the quote-unquote lower decks, you know, those ensigns. And this show sort of gives us a nice little group of people that we're all met with. So, yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. And, you know, as much as you can access the show on Amazon Prime, I think one of the advantages of home media for this is something I will always collect Star Trek ones, is the kind of the behind-the-scenes process. They've been fantastic people online, really taking people behind sort of their writing process, their design styles, some of the Easter eggs, but being able to kind of watch some of these documentaries and insights into the episodes, it really enhances it. So it's one of these shows that does benefit from repeat viewings and not just catch a new episode, dispose of it, and on to the next one. It's just been the highlight of Star Trek fandom. And with season 2 having just finished, it's been kind of a good run. So I cannot wait for season 3 next year.
Yeah, this is one which I've heard great things about online and from various members of the Nerd Party. I really probably do need to watch it, I guess, to see how I can follow it. And but there's just so much stuff on at the moment. It's getting up towards season, so there's loads of films out. There's loads of screeners dropping and stuff like that. But perhaps over the Christmas break, I've got about 10 days off work coming up, so maybe I might dip my toe in on Prime for that one. Myself, I watched Tick Tick Boom, actually for the second time in about a week over the weekend. This one actually really impressed me. I was not too enamored with In the Heights when it came out earlier, but this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's directorial debut. In Nights was based on one of his musicals. This is actually based on a Jonathan Larson one-man show that explores the playwright and musical writer in the lead up to sadly his death. That's not a spoiler. But basically, it looks at him as he's trying to get his first show into production, and it's got a fantastic performance by Andrew Garfield in there. But it does have a tinge of sadness in it towards the end when you get the voicemail left by Stephen Sondheim, who sadly passed away over the weekend. So yeah, quite an emotional watch. But for me, it was one of the most entertaining sort of new musicals that I'd never seen it before, and it really sort of blew me away. And yeah, Andrew Garfield is unsurprisingly once again a fantastic actor. Everyone's saying, "Oh my gosh, it's his best role in years," but to what I say that, go and watch Under the Silver Lake because they probably haven't seen it, and we're big fans of that one here. And I have to ask, did you watch the big release on Netflix this weekend?
What was the big Netflix release? This was Selling Sunset?
No. I'm talking about A Castle for Christmas, directed by horror director Mary Larbert, who did Pet Sematary. She directs a romantic comedy set in Scotland, starring Carrie Elways as a Scottish duke who stays in the castle Dunbar, which is apparently in Aberdeenshire, even though Dunbar is, well, that's what they say, that castles go for a lot in Aberdeenshire. But yeah, Dunbar, even though when Brooke Shields, the author, arrives in Edinburgh, she gets a Highland taxi, which drives her to Dunbar, which technically would be about, 20 minutes, half an hour outside of Edinburgh, but apparently it's up somewhere in Aberdeenshire. It's about as stereotypically Scottish as you can imagine, even though the fact that the main role is played by an American. Yeah, it's about it's an amusing watch if you're Scottish, let's just say. And I guess we'll probably need to do an episode on it and get Kim's view, given that she's such a big fan of Mary Larbert's work on Pet Sematary and stuff like that.
Yeah, count me in. I suppose I've well passed my 52 films by women challenge, so I'm not looking to kind of stuff the numbers at this stage. But I'll probably give it a go. I remembered I think it was about October 2020. They were filming it, even though it's meant to be in Aberdeenshire, but they talk about it being in Dunbar. It was actually filmed just outside of Edinburgh in South Queensferry, and I remembered being out for a run and just passing by this castle in the snow in the middle of autumn time. So yeah, I'm curious to see it. I was kind of curious, what are they filming here? So I took a little break from running to start googling what's filming in South Queensferry. I remembered hearing about it being this Netflix movie. So that's the second
unsurprisingly one without Vanessa Hudgens in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we've got now a reputation for being the home of Netflix Christmas movies, but no one ever acknowledges they are here in Edinburgh. So yeah, the madness continues.
Well, the Edinburgh airport got a very brief glimpse in this one. And for this week's discourse, because what would it be on film Twitter without some discourse? And basically, it's nearly about 2 years since an article in Empire magazine interviewed Martin Scorsese, and he made just a roundabout comment about the fact I think it stemmed from using de-aging effects in The Irishman and how they compare to the Marvel movies. And he said something along the lines of that they weren't really cinema, they were more like theme park attractions. And then, of course, that kicked off. And it's been going on ever since, now to the point that a director cannot promote a new film or an actor cannot promote a new project without being asked if they would like to be in a Marvel movie. What do you think about the latest Marvel movies? And then Empire have gone and done it again because they've riled everyone's backs up by releasing their new 100 greatest movies of all time list. And I think greatest should probably be put in inverted commas because this was a list which was voted for by members of the Empire writing staff and the public. And we all know by now, especially here in the UK, the public should not really be allowed to vote on anything. If you're voting for a new ferry, you get it called Boaty McBoatface. You get Brexit. You get all sorts of wild, crazy things. And it's fair to say that people were not impressed by the fact that there was, I think it was 8 superhero movies in the top 100, 6 MCU films, including the likes of Thor Ragnarok. Apparently, Avengers Endgame is the 8th greatest movie of all time. The Dark Knight is the 4th greatest movie of all time. And there was only 2 films directed by women, only a couple of films directed by people of colour, and very few foreign language films, or basically actually any films directed before 1972. So I'm sure that you have got some strong views on this one. What did you make of the latest list and lists in general?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised to be honest about
it's
it.
a completely unshocking list, given the readership.
Yeah, I could easily predict it. I think the sad thing for me is like it kind of sums up for myself. I always think, you especially think for some of these kind of larger magazines and organizations, they have such a great platform to kind of highlight lesser seen films, promote kind of underseen directors, as you say, so little women directors, people of color involved in there. And the frustrating thing is you take someone like Empire, for example, where I think they've got an issue out next month where inside they've got an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson. They've got a lot of really good things showcasing movies, but you look at the cover and it may be there's two little corners dedicated to a new Steven Spielberg film and something else, and then the rest of it is all dedicated to like Disney Plus kind of coverage of like Star Wars TV shows, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Loki, all these sorts of things. And it's like these things are like already in the bank. I mean, you just have to look at last night where even in the UK, while people are sleeping through a Sunday night, websites were crashing as people booked Spider-Man tickets. And even last night in America, those things are fine. Like there should be a way to sort of like help people broaden their horizons and so on, and give those things are people are going to watch them anyway. They don't need sort of that validated. And I think that there's always opportunities to shine a light on some of these films, because for cinema to survive COVID, yeah, we need all these big blockbuster movies to do equally well. But, thinking of some of the small independent cinema places, they're so important to people's enjoyment, to British film, etc. If people have a platform then to try and shine a light on it, and not just the sort of films that we know are going to be a success.
Yeah, I know. I find it interesting that I think it was it Time Out dropped their alternative, like 100 greatest movies of all time, and I think it's worlds apart in what they were promoting as well. So a nice bit of trolling from Time Out on that one. But I think if you are going to do something like this, I think you need to remove these definitive terms of greatest, best films of all time, because most of the time people will vote for their favorite films or the films that they want to rewatch all the time. Are you looking? Because it's all about is it critical analysis? Are these the greatest films of all time? The most important films of all time. I totally admit that if I was asked for a film which I said the best films of all time, it would be completely different from the 10 films which I would want to watch if stuck on a desert island and I was only allowed to take 10 DVDs or Blu-rays or an iPad with 10 films loaded on it. So yeah, it's all about context and stuff like that. So I think like you say, it is important for these magazines and stuff like that to shine a light on these things, on films which people, I mean, everyone's going to see, like you say, everyone's going to see Spider-Man. I mean, apparently, with the websites crashing, I was lucky enough I woke up early about 5 and managed to book it no problem. It did take me a while. I think there was actually a problem with the Cineworld limited card booking as opposed to actual bookings. But yeah, everyone rushing out to get their Spider-Man tickets, even though, let's face it, they're not going to struggle to get a screening when most of the multiplexes are going to probably be having it on 7, 8, 9 screens. It's about the other movies. It's about, the last duels, the card counters, those ones which, in the wake of those films, only get one evening screening or something like that. We need to be championing other films, because yeah, people will go for the Marvel movies, but it's about keeping them around and going back for everything else. I know The Guardian at the moment are getting a lot of flack because for some reason writers in The Guardian keep moaning about the fact that people aren't ready to go back to the cinema, when you just have to look at the numbers that the UK Cinema Association posted, that apparently was 16.4 million people went to the cinema in October. So Bond, No Time to Die, is now the third highest grossing film of all time in the UK. So it's like people are willing to go back. It just depends on the films. But, if they're willing to do that, they need to be able to take chances on other things. So I guess we'll have to see what happens in the future. But yeah, I think take the term, if you read the greatest film list of all time, take the word greatest with just the tiniest pinch of salt, I think. And now for a film which may or may not make that the next time that they do one of those lists. It's The House of Gucci, film which explores the true life tale of the breakdown of the famous family fashion house Gucci when a young lady named Patrizia Reginati joins the family when she marries Maurizio Gucci. So, Lee, were you looking forward to this one?
Not really. I was like gonna go see it. Like that was a banker, but I was kind of getting a bit sort of, I don't know, like I just felt like I wasn't hyped for it. Like I don't really care about Gucci. Ridley Scott is a fantastic director, but it's often the way that sort of, with a director that puts out a lot of work, you're not always guaranteed that every one of his films are going to be to your personal taste or cup of tea. So, this one I thought, I'm not too sure, but, I went along kind of opening night to see it anyway. And I think I'd seen some reviews from some friends that had saw it and they were like, pretty terrible, not so good. And I was kind of like, oh, I do trust these people's opinion. But I went along to see it on a Friday night in a packed screening. And I went with my partner and I kept turning around every so often, kind of looking at people coming into the screen at the end of the movie and going, wow, it's really busy. And it's really filled with like lots of groups of women that are here to see the film, which is something that when I go along to see my indie movies or kind of pop along to see the latest Marvel movie or whatever, like that's not the typical audience that are being attracted into the cinema. And it's hugely important that we get an audience like that back into the cinema to help things kind of sustain through this COVID period. And I watched it the whole, 2.5 hours and I was like, okay, it's not the greatest film in the world, but I really like it and enjoy it. And again, similar to King Richard a few weeks ago, I kind of came out and went, okay, there's this problem with it, but I can't deny that I just really enjoyed it and clicked with it. I loved what it was doing with some of the material. I think there's definitely a better version of the film out there, but I think there's so many more worse versions of The House of Gucci out there, and I'm so happy with the version we got. Like there was so many parts where I just couldn't wipe the smile from my face and the enjoyment. I just think it was a really good movie aimed at adults. We've spoken about that before, where you see a lot of films and it's aimed at sort of like families or the sort of the 18 to 29 group. With a film like this, you were like, ooh, this is a film that's $75 million. It's not a First Cow, for example, or the latest film from Annapurna or Neon or something like that. Like it's a film with like a decent box office, decent budget, and it's aimed strictly at kind of adults. And I like being able to go along and see that film and just enjoy big name actors doing really silly accents talking about business. I was into that. What about yourself? Because I think you got to see it a bit earlier than me.
Yeah, I saw the Scottish Press Days screening after much toil and tribulation about it. It was on the list, then it was off the list, and they changed the time. Then you had to sign an embargo. Now, I'd originally thought that it had been pulled from the Scottish Press Days because it already screened in London, so it's like, why aren't they screening it? And it's like, oh, are the reviews that bad that they're trying to minimize the damage? But most of the people I've seen and spoken to, yeah, they fall into, one of three camps. They either love it, hate it, or they kind of are in the middle where there's lots of good things about it, but then there's also lots of bad things about it. I probably fall down in the middle. There's moments where it is glamorous, it is gauche, it is gaudy, and then there's moments where it is incredibly tedious and tiresome. I think the main issue is that Ridley is unsure of what tone to go for. At times, it's a very sort of serious crime drama about this family in the sort of tone of like The Godfather, the power plays for, trying to get control of the company. And then you've got this other movie which has got basically Lady Gaga as a femme fatale and haute couture, and then Jared Leto doing what Jared Leto does, which is act in a completely different movie to every single other person. And a lot of people, I think his is the most divisive performance. I think it's fair to say, but it's the kind of thing which I can see being nominated for the Oscars. I put this in my review, that is, I would not be surprised. I mean, if he got nominated for a Golden Globe or what was it, for The Little Ones or whatever film it was, which I never saw last year, I can completely see some people buying into this performance and going for it. And there's other people who think it's one of the worst things that they've ever seen. But I mean, that's fashion, isn't it? You know, fashion, you know, some people will look at something running down the runway and be like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And some people will be going, I don't get it, I don't understand it. And that's what we've got here. I think because Ridley didn't know, either he didn't know what tone he was looking to go for, or every single actor was acting in a slightly different movie. He just sort of tried to cobble together whatever he was able to do, because, you know, Adam Driver plays it completely straight, apart from the rather raucous sex scene where he seems to revert back to his Adam Sackler character from Girls. And then you've got Al Pacino acting like he's doing outtakes from the Godfather just when he thought he was out. They've pulled him back into that type of movie. I'm presuming that, you know, the Gaga factor is perhaps maybe behind this getting more of a female audience and more of an audience in general, because, you know, Ridley Scott has been outspoken on why people weren't attending The Last Duel, which was, again, I think I was like you. I was not entirely fussed by this movie. I wasn't actually really looking forward to The Last Duel, but I saw it at press day, and I was actually really surprised by how good that one was. Hopefully, people will give it a chance when it comes out in Disney Plus in a couple of weeks, or maybe even try and watch it based on off the back of House of Gucci. But yeah, for me, it was just a bit too tonally muddled, and it was too long as well. I think there was a good 2-hour movie in here, but I think I mean, you were saying you think there's a better version out there. I mean, Ridley Scott says there could be a director's cut, but so, I mean, if this was 2 hours 40 and was not a director's cut, goodness knows how long the full length version is going to be.
Probably the better version of this is something like Succession, which is very much to my taste and style. I mean, I'm loving Mondays at the moment, being able to watch new episodes about like a family bickering for power inside sort of like a dynasty operation. And I think like all the criticisms people have of this movie are completely valid. Like, there's certain films where they can be dismissed and you're like, nah, you're wrong. Like, I totally get it, but I think it's one of these films that just comes down strictly to personal taste. And I think I think it'll be interesting to see sort of the potentially an extended version that Ridley Scott's alluded to, where the film does end rather abruptly, and it sort of encourages you to go and do your own research, which is basically looking up the Wikipedia entries of these real life individuals to find out what happened after, sort of like, because a certain big event happens, and then you sort of get a bit of a quick prologue that lasts about a minute or so, but some of the story is just even more wild that kind of takes place in that kind of sort of glossed over period of time. So I'd be really keen to see a little bit more of that. I mean, I could easily have watched a 3-hour version of this. I mean, I realize I'm such a hypocrite because I'm usually like, films are too long, bring back the power of the editor, whereas this, it's like, I think I just enjoyed that world. And I think with the kind of, everyone seems to be doing a different movie, I really quite like that. I mean, I'm not a Jared Leto fan. I think it's been almost probably 20 years since his last great performance in something like Requiem for a Dream, but I kind of watched this and I was like, it's quite funny. And you kind of get the impression where, whether it's sort of shows like Succession or, the sort of things that we see about like these one percenters out there in the world, even down to your kind of the Trump families, the Murdochs, etc. They're all deranged. They're all lunatics. They all have their own different ways of going to power. And you watch something like this, and they're all bringing their own different tone. And I bet that's kind of close to real life. Perhaps maybe the accents might not be necessarily right, or historically accurate, but a dynamic like that I can totally buy into. And like even sort of like the Pacino character, etc., sort of as Aldo, and his relationship with Paolo. How many kind of rich families can be like that? And I mean, it tells you everything that you need to know. There's a character at one point that you hear gets like 42 million, and then within a couple years they're gone. They die destitute in London, and you're like, that little hint tells me everything I need to know that this character is kind of a bit insane. And I was expecting to kind of go in there and just not be impressed, and whether I had slightly low expectations and they were surprised upon, I just thought, this is what a Friday night at the cinema's like. I mean, I rarely go to the cinema on a Friday night. It was just the only sort of time that worked to go see a film with my partner, where we were like, wanted to see it for this episode, and she was keen to see it, so we went along on Friday. And it was great to hear it with an audience that are laughing at a lot of the right bits. And it feels like you have to be in on the joke to probably enjoy it. Whereas I can imagine a lot of people just going, this isn't funny, I'm not going to go along with it. And that's fair enough. And sometimes I've seen comparisons. I don't know if I buy into it, because this is definitely a better film to something like Showgirls, where it could become a potentially sort of memed and enjoyable movie. I don't sort of see House of Gucci going that way. I don't see the retro screenings at the Prince Charles or things like that. I just see people maybe watching this film or a bit of word of mouth. But I 100% agree with you. I don't think they deserve it as such, but I can see Lady Gaga getting an Oscar nomination. It's certainly going to get ones for like costume and design, makeup. I think Jared Leto will probably get a bunch of nominations. It'll do great at the Golden Globes, which I don't know if that's a positive thing to say or not, but it's going to get all these awards. I wouldn't necessarily put it in that prestige, but in terms of an enjoyable movie on a Friday, good enough.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it was, what was the one with Christopher Plummer? There was All the Money in the World, whatever, that got loads of Golden Globe nominations. So yeah, this one totally will as well. I mean, Gaga, I think one of my favourite moments was, I think just like after her introduction, where you see her like touch typing in the office, but she's also holding a cigarette while typing. I was like, commitment to the cause there. And I mean, Jared Leto, I think he's just too self-aware now about what people think of him following the Suicide Squad. Not the Suicide Squad, where, apparently he was, sending rat corpses and stuff to people. And, this interview where he was apparently, snorting Arrabbiata sauce and stuff like that, and, doing lines of Parmesan and whatever. It's like, he knows what people are thinking of him. So he's just doing that sort of thing. And I haven't seen Succession, but I'm assuming that Paolo would be the cousin Greg of the family. Would that be about right?
No, I wouldn't say so. I don't think there's a cousin Greg character necessarily in this, but there is a lot of the Roy family within these kind of characters. And then I'd recommend a great book, for people to check out. I'm kind of working my way through it as an audiobook at the moment, but a lot of people look at something like Succession, and there's a lot of comparisons obviously being drawn between House of Gucci and something like Succession at the same time, where it's all about the Murdochs, these big families, but a lot of it's been drawn from, here's a wonderful way to kind of round things off, the Disney family and sort of like everything involving that history. And it's a great book called The Disney Wars, and they drew a lot of that for Succession for some inspiration. So I would highly recommend people to check that out too.
Yeah, and because I think they're going back to the point about, how everyone was kind of acting in a different movie and something. You said you would quite happily sit through 3 hours of it. I was thinking, obviously, there's probably a lot of parallels with, I think it's like Ryan Murphy's like American Crime Stories and stuff like that, the death of Giovanni Versace. And I would have almost liked to have seen it as potentially like a limited series where, you've got the events that take place in the movie, but each episode is seen from the viewpoint of a different character. And I think that's something where you could have maybe leaned into like each person's individual performance if they were the sole focus of each episode. So if you had like from the Jared Leto perspective, from Aldo, the Pacino perspective, and then, I think maybe people might have been a bit too sort of bored by the Adam Driver one. Nothing against him as an actor, but, he is very much the straight man in this one. And there's that section where, it starts out what feels like it's Lady Gaga's story. It's Patricia's story about joining the family and her scheming her way to getting hold of this company. And then it's like when she suddenly disappears for like a large portion of the sort of second act. It's like, it's quite jarring, and there is like this sort of vacuum that she leaves behind. So I guess that's maybe sort of testament to her star power. And yeah, I can see her getting nominated. Will she win? No, I don't think so. I think it's probably potentially sort of Kristen Stewart or someone else's year. Gaga will get a nomination, but no, I don't think she'll get the win. But yeah, I mean, is it the next Showgirls? I think there's just too many stretches where not a lot happens for it to be the next Showgirls. I think if it was like a 90-minute camp fest, then yes, maybe. But I think there's too many bits that I think Prince Charles would struggle to fill with entertainment and activities in.
As much as the sex scene is quite fun in House of Gucci, it is not in any way comparable with the iconic sex scene in the Showgirl swimming pool. So,
which,
I mean, that's got to be your standard.
Taken from Jaws with her thrashing around.
Yes, exactly. That's the point you've got to make to hit camp. And like this film, as you say, it's camp, it's tacky, it's gauche. It is the Gucci brand. Like that's what it's like. I don't understand the appeal of something like that whatsoever. But House of Gucci feels like it's a good representation of that sort of brand where people, you know, it's not a film that's prestigious. It probably maybe wants to try and be, but it's also kind of one of those ones where it's actually just that little bit tacky and silly, and as well, like, you know, imagine paying insane amount of money for like a belt buckle that's like, you know, a family's name on it. I don't get it, but that's what this film is, and it really kind of sings to sort of that brand, which is quite an impressive thing to take, whether that's by accident or design or my overinterpretation.
Yeah, so a prestige picture, but it's actually dressed up as one, but really it's not quite. It's what you're saying is basically it's fake Gucci, bought on Times Square from some guy where he's got a bunch of belt buckles and bags wrapped up in a towel so you can dash the second the cops come along.
Exactly, and if Succession is like the Gucci brand, this is like the second cheapest item in the store, and that's perfectly fine. You need that balance and more original pictures like this. You know, that is what I want to see.
Yeah, I think the Gucci, it was always struggling to find that balancing act between the serious and camp, because, you know, you might think, you know, you're getting a serious sort of romance montage, and then they go in to get married and you hear the church organs, and then your brain's thinking, those church organs, that sounds an awful lot like the beginning of Faith by George Michael. And then yeah, you get Faith by George Michael and you're like, right, yeah, that's the type of picture I'm watching. So yeah, any serious moment undercut by the chance to put in a classic 80s song, and then Jared Leto spitting up vowels like he's choking on spaghetti.
Absolutely. I mean, who could not be sold on checking that movie out after that glowing recommendation from us all?
Yeah, a glowing recommendation where it's the very epitome of a 3-star film. But yeah, I mean, like you say, everyone's got to make their own opinions. You know, it is really one of those really weird films where it is like, it's a good movie, it's a terrible movie, it's a middling movie, and yet everyone is right. So, you know, you've listened to us, go ahead, book your ticket, make your own opinion, and let us know what you think. But we'll be back next week with more movie reviews. So we'll see you then. And how should we sign this off? Oh yeah, perhaps a similar way to Elsie Fisher at the end of an 8th grade YouTube video. Gucci.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.